This is round 6 of Norway Chess 2020. So Alireza Firouzja played Aryan Tari in round 5. He won a lovely Italian game, and so Aryan's looking to strike back here. He's playing white. Can he put the pressure on Alireza with the black pieces? So he kicks off with e4. Alireza goes c6, and we head down this exchange variation of the Caro-Kann. After the pawn recaptures here, bishop to d3, the knight came to f6, pawn c3, so a nice stable centre for white. Sometimes this bishop's coming to f4 here, and Alireza just plays to disrupt that a bit. He goes bishop to g4, already putting a question to white. Do you want to go knight f3, knight e2, walk into a pin? Well, Aryan plays queen to b3. He hits this pawn on b7, and so Alireza defends with the queen. Now you can't go bishop to f4 anymore. The queen's taken that diagonal. There's also no tactics working for white here, by the way. So if you go with this one, capture the bishop, thinking, okay, then I take on b7, I'm hitting your rook. Well, now you're walking into queen c1 mate. Not ideal. So you can't go bishop to f4. So Aryan carries on with pawn h3, and he puts a question to this bishop. It drops back to d7 here, which might look slightly passive after black plays pawn e6, which we see later. But if you'd come to h5, it's actually not sitting so great there. There's some lines where this knight comes to e2, then bishop to f4, and black would like to meet it with e5 if possible. But then this bishop b5 check stuff can be really annoying if your bishop's not on d7, if it's outside the pawn chain. So it's quite deep stuff, I know, but this is why the bishop drops back to d7 and not to h5. But Aryan didn't go knight e2. He went knight f3 instead. So a different variation we're going down. Alireza goes knight to c6, castles from white, pawn e6 prepares to develop, rook e1. The bishop came to d6 here, and now this is a mistake from Tari. So he should actually spend the time to bring this queen back into the game. He should either go queen c2, queen d1, both with the same idea of bringing the queen to e2, where it then supports the e5 square, and you can land a knight in there soon. But what Aryan does here is he goes bishop to g5, and this bishop is just misplaced on that square, because Alireza simply castles his king, ignoring the threat against the knight, because if white wants to take that, he'll be more than happy to take back with the pawn, open the g file for his rook here, and also take away this e5 square from the knight. And his king's actually sitting perfectly safe in this position. So the bishop g5 move is a mistake, and Tari actually learnt from this later on, a few months later. He played queen to d1, queen to e2, a better way of playing. So knight b to d2 now from Tari. We had knight h5 from Alireza. He further makes this bishop look silly, because after queen to d1, pawn f6, bishop e3, now he jumps into f4, and that knight's just drastically improved, whereas the bishop doesn't look too much better than when it was on its starting square. So the bishop on d3 is hit. It drops back to f1, lends that king some support, especially this h3 pawn, and now Alireza comes up with one of his classic attacking moves. If in doubt, play g5, and that's what he does here, just crashing through on that king side. He loves to attack, bring rooks to the g file. Let's see what happens in the game. So pawn c4 played by Tari. He needs to get an initiative going on the queen side. Alireza sidestepped with the king. The rook came to c1. This one came to g8, and now here Tari misplays it. So he should carry on playing on the queen side. Let's say, for example, with pawn a3, preparing b4. Now if black goes, say, a5 to clamp down on that, well, you can simply go king h1, nudge to the side, away from that g file, and you're kind of just asking black how they want to unravel the pieces. There's a bit of a traffic jam in the centre of the board here, and whilst this battery looks nice of queen and bishop, the knight stands in the way. And if ever you go g4, well, we'll capture, the rook can recapture, and you can always play g3 just to close that g file. Even if you never actually take the knight, you're just closing down the attacking ideas, and the knight still stands in the way of the bishop and queen. But what we'll see in the game, why this is so drastically different, is that Tari takes on f4. He gives up that dark squared bishop. the bishop recaptures, and it's just starting to liberate that black position. So we had pawn b4 from Tari. This was his idea of giving up the bishop, that now the bishop has left this diagonal, it can't take that pawn. If you take with the knight, then this is very good for white, opening up the rook, better for white. So we didn't have takes, we had queen d6, simply stepping away from the pin, and Tari goes pawn b5, we had knight e7, pawn c5, and it might look like he's getting somewhere, but actually this isn't really doing very much. Those pawns aren't too dangerous. If ever you go c6, black can just take it back. There isn't enough pressure to pile on the pinned piece here, and so black can now turn the attention to the king side. White has to start defending. So pawn g3 was played by Tari. He wants to close that g-file, even if he doesn't actually take the bishop. But pawn g4 was now played by Alireza. He starts ripping it open against the king, and already you can't take here. We simply take with check. This is much better for black. So after this g4 move, the pawn recaptured, the rook took back, the bishop came to h3, it hits this rook, retreated to g7, and now you can't take this pawn here, or black is crashing through on g3. This is the problem. If you say took on d7, then we can nudge back to f4, we open up the check of the rook, and after the king moves away, we pick up this bishop, the queen is coming in, this whole attack is just completely deadly for black. So we didn't have takes on e6, king h1 played, and now Alireza could actually break through with bishop takes on g3 already, but instead he goes pawn e5, he saves that pawn, these bishops got exchanged, and still his bishop is immune because the queen is coming into h3, and then g2 with checkmate if you ever open the g-file for the rook. So knight h2 played by Tari. He wants to give his king some protection. He also opens up his queen. The queen came to h3 anyway. Rook g1 covered that mating square, and now this rook joined the party, double stacked on the g-file as Hikari would say. I love watching his streaming videos, by the way. The queen came to e2 here, so now that one's laterally defending, also looking at the e-file, maybe preparing some sacrifices on a good day, but this is really tough for Tari now. All of the black pieces are playing in the attack, and after pawn to e4, rook c3, even the knight joins the party, jumps in on f5. This bishop's just immune the whole time. If you ever take it, the rook was coming down to g2, threatening their mate on h2. And this time you can't take because now you can take on g1 with mate. This one left the back rank. It's just no good. None of the tactics are working for white. And that's why Tari just goes for this kamikaze now. He chucks his knight, sacks it on e4. He's desperately looking for some play. The queen recaptured, but now Alireza breaks through. Can you see how he did it? He simply takes here, bishop crashes through on g3. Now that wasn't recaptured. If you take back, well, you can take your pick here. You can take with rook, you can take with knight. The whole thing is just completely busted. So after the bishop took, we had rook g2 instead, just covering this mating threat. But now rook e7, Alireza switches back to that open e-file. The queen gives ground, and now he doubles there. And I love how he just switches away from the g-file. The work there is done. He's now threatening this deadly check down here. And this was actually too much. Tari threw in the towel. Why did he do it? Well, you can't stop the rooks coming to the back rank. Say you bring this one back, well then you can simply take on h2 here. The rook recaptures. You give a check like this. Now if the rook blocks, you can simply bring a piece in like a knight or a rook, and you're just going to be mating here very soon. And if the king gives ground like this, well then we can check like this. The king comes to f1, and this is actually mate. So what a phenomenal crush by Alireza. He's really got Tari's number this tournament. If you enjoyed this game and want to see his other game against Tari, then click here. And to see my whole Magnus Alireza playlist, click below that. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe to see future videos, and I hope to see you soon.